It's 1:30 p.m. in Lagos, 12:30 p.m. in London and in Accra, Ghana. And we're bringing you markets, analysis, and insights on Business Incorporated live from Channels Television, Lagos. And here's what's coming up on the program. African Union says the continent needs investment in intermediate production. South African bonds generate best returns in emerging markets. And Egypt Air to get 18 Boeing narrow-body aircraft to expand fleets. Welcome to the program. I'm Will Ibang. Let's kick off with the markets, shall we? First up, major equities in Africa. We begin with Nigeria. The NGX at intraday was trading 0.02% up. We're seeing that 70,000 level still going strong. We're hoping the close for today won't flip to the negative. Now let's look at Kenya. It's Friday's close, 0.71% in the green, hopefully not in the red. Let's look at South Africa and see how they perform. South Africa was up at intraday at 0.7%. Nigeria, as I mentioned, was 0.02% up. Let's look at Egypt. Let's see what it did at intraday. Egypt was up at intraday, 0.29%. And we see Nairobi's, as I mentioned, was up Friday's session, but we're going to go straight to the NGX now and see how that's trading was pushing the NGX to trade marginally in green territory with Onose Asotie and now Holo investment analyst, Main Street Capital. Good afternoon, Onose. It's good to have you on the program.
Good afternoon, Will. Thanks for having me.
Onose, NGX is at 0.02% as the last time I checked. Wondering what stocks are moving it? What are investor sentiments at the moment?
Investors are quite bullish, although they are cautious, because even if you look at last week's performance, while week on week the market closed about 0.93% in green, we didn't see a lot of volatility, which means that while investors are maintaining a bullish sentiment, they are kind of cautious right now because they don't want to go all in. The kind of market we have. They don't want a situation where they get in and then they can't sell off. So what we see this morning is we have cautious trading, but then we see stocks like UBA and GTCO moving the market, and that's normal, because a lot of people are going into banking stocks right now. One of those reasons is we are in earnings season right now. And if you look at a lot of banking stocks results, we see that, we see outsized gains, 120% profit after tax, in Q3 or the 9 month. However, there are some banks, I know it's the case for GT, where a good chunk of their gains, at least for Q3, is not from, FX revaluation. I know that for GT in Q3, they increased their interest income from about 83 billion to about 120 billion, during the period. So now we are seeing those kind of stocks and even those kind of investors getting into those stocks and really looking for the ones with strong fundamentals, especially in the banking space. But then of course we also see some insurance stocks that are really picking up right now. But those ones aren't really moving the market. The big movers are banks like UBA, GT, and even Airtel a little bit. At least right now in today's session.
So we look at those are the big guys now. Well, let's look at those penny stocks that have been, making moves since last week. Japan Gold, BQ, how are they trading at intraday? Are investors still grabbing at them?
Well, it depends. It depends from stock to stock. I know for a stock like Cornerstone is up. Today GPLC is a bit down. So it really depends, and there are some sectors that right now are doing really well. Like I mentioned, insurance. If you go and look at stocks like Cornerstone, like Mutual Benefit, like NEM, they are doing really well right now. This is kind of their season. At this point in time, and I believe that not really, they're not as much fundamentally driven, as they are with news reports and people just trying to get in and them being lifted by lifted by the general market sentiment.
Thank you so much, Onose. We'll keep track and see how the market closes. But just one word, bullish or bearish, so we know where we stand at the close of the bell.
Yeah, I think we're going to close bullish. Thank
you so much, Onose Asote-Enaolo, investment analyst with Main Street Capital. Now let's check out markets in the Middle East, where it's mixed. At intraday, Abu Dhabi was down 0.15%. We see Dubai trading in opposite direction, 0.35%. Now let's look at how Saudi and Qatar traded at intraday. We see them, Qatar down 0.4% and the Qatari index up 0.28%. That's almost 1/3%. Now, the Web Summit, one of the largest tech conferences, is underway in Lisbon, Portugal. But this year's event has been mired in controversy. Several tech firms have pulled out of the event, and Germany's economy minister also cancelled his attendance. Joining us with more is Deutsche Welle's correspondent Chiponda Chimbelu. Chip, why did Germany's economy minister cancel his attendance?
Thanks for having me. Well, the decision by Germany's economy minister Robert Habeck to cancel his attendance at the Web Summit is linked to a backlash to comments by the event's founder. Last month, Web Summit co-founder Paddy Cosgrave criticized Western support for Israel in its war against Hamas. Paddy Cosgrave apologized for his statement and, of course, stepped down from his position as CEO of the Web Summit on October 21. But the controversy has continued. Last week, 300 Israeli entrepreneurs wrote an open letter to Germany's economy minister, Robert Habeck, calling for him to boycott the event. They said Habeck's presence at the Web Summit would send, quote, a contradictory signal, end quote. The German economy minister's spokeswoman said the discussion at the Web Summit played a role in the decision, as, of course, the overall political situation in Portugal, where the country's prime minister resigned last week. Of course, it's also worth noting that the German economy minister's boycott is just one of many, which includes companies.
But what can we expect from this year's event?
Well, it is some of the big names that have pulled out, and they did that last month. We're talking about the likes of Google, Meta, Intel, Siemens, and Amazon Web Services. And in terms of Amazon Web Services, it was also one of the partners for the conference. But despite their absence, organizers will still have still actually managed to attract a mix of celebrities, and that includes U.S. whistleblower Chelsea Manning, who will be speaking about digital rights and security, the mayor of Kiev, Vladimir Klitschko, and he will be present to speak about Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine. And then there's also Stella Assange, the wife of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, and she will also, of course, be attending. Now, when we turn back to Germany and its participation, it is expected to be one of the countries with the largest delegations, despite its economy minister canceling his attendance last week. So several startups will be there, with, of course, artificial intelligence being a major topic this year. So despite the boycotts and cancellations, there are still many opportunities for networking at one of the world's biggest tech events.
Interesting turnout there. Now let's turn our attention to the markets. What can we expect, Chip?
Well, expectations, are that markets will be trading higher today. Investors are feeling more confident, and that's partly due to the fact that the Fed plans to keep rates higher for longer. And in terms of data, this week, traders will be looking out for U.S. consumer price data to be released on Tuesday. And then, of course, they will also be keeping a very close eye on developments from the summit between U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, the leaders of the two world's biggest economies are set to meet in California on Wednesday. This will be their second face-to-face meeting during the Biden presidency. So investors will be watching for any signs that U.S.-Chinese relations may be thawing. Ties between the two countries deteriorated earlier this year.
Thank you so much, Chiponda Chimbelu, Deutsche Welle's correspondent right there in Berlin, bringing us the updates. And we'll look forward to how this Web Summit, pans out. Now we move over to other matters where the Intra-Africa Trade Fair is underway in Cairo, Egypt, and promoting competitiveness of African member countries under the AFCFTA agenda is the alignment is one of the goals of the IntraAfrican Bank, and it's set to support private sector development, competitiveness, and strong trade performance for African countries. And that's according to the African Union Commissioner for Trade and Industry and the Vice President for Private Sector, Infrastructure, and Industrialization at the African Development Bank. The supply value chain should see more investments. Let's take a listen to what they had to say.
We need one large market as a point for covering, a point for prosperity, and a point for resilience. And in this market, production is the starting point. We need to produce industrial goods of a high quality, very good standards, and which can really meet the needs not just of Africans but consumers across the world. And this requires development of regional and continental value chains. And to make them distinct, not imitations from other industrial goods being imported from other parts of the world, which actually are going to be dumping. You need to invest in intermediate production as well as final goods, and that brings in a trend development of industrial skills and development of facilities for research and development.
The recent Africa Investment Forum, ourselves, AfriExim, Arise, and the Islamic Development Bank signed to be partners of the Alliance for specialized agro-industrial processing zones, because we really want to address agro-processing and make sure that we actually value add in agro-processing and trade and supply within Africa. Cotton to textiles to garments, that's a regional value chain. We have several countries in that space. Then we talk about critical minerals. We produce the critical minerals for the electric vehicle battery supply chain. Why don't we actually value add? Why are we evacuating all of this to other geopolitical markets that are looking to create this? We conducted a study with Bloomberg, and it showed that we can actually produce this, Your Excellency, at a third of the cost, relative to the developed markets. So we have to find a way to actually attract, parties in the developed markets to come and partner with us to produce here. But we should take advantage of our own regional value chains.
Now, still on the intra-African trade, the AfriExim Bank and Nigeria's United Bank for Africa, UBA, have sealed a $150 million trade financing facility deal. The agreement, signed on the sidelines of the ongoing Intra-African Trade Fair in Cairo, Egypt, is part of the Ukraine Crisis Adjustment Trade Financing Program for Africa. According to AfriExim Bank, the facility, crafted to mitigate the adverse effects of the Russia-Ukraine crisis, and aims to support UBA's clients to increase their financing for businesses across various sectors in the Nigerian economy. Next, we examine how gender inclusiveness impacts economic development in Africa. Do stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Now, recent studies have shown that well-planned infrastructural investments delivered and managed with gender-inclusive and responsive approaches could promote women's empowerment, gender equality, and economic opportunities. But according to the report, Africa, as one of the world's largest, poorest populations with the highest deficit in infrastructural development. Clarice Inyan, development research expert at the International Center for Evaluation and Development, joins us from Accra, Ghana. Good afternoon, Clarice. Just want to say very quickly, just tell us, what's the status of women's economic empowerment in Africa?
Okay, thank you very much, Will. Thank you for having me. Yes, so kindly allow me to give a brief overview of the International Center for Evaluation and Development. Yes, we are an independent African-owned and led think tank that uses research outputs for policy and action. We work in the global south, but our focus is in Africa. So yeah, the women economic empowerment status in Africa, I must say, is varied across the continent. So women economic empowerment comes in the form of women's access and control over income, women's access and control over productive resources, women's time and leadership. Studies shown by the African Gender Index that there's a large disparity across the continent. And the African Gender 2063 even stated that they want to see an Africa whereby there's an all-inclusive citizenship with regards to decision-making. But this is not the case across the continent.
You've been part of a team under the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funded research project implemented in Africa that sought to look at the triple nexus between women's economic empowerment, infrastructure, and nutrition. What are some of the policy gaps and insights you've picked to enable sustainable women empowerment?
Okay, thank you very much, Will. Yeah, so our study was from 54 low and middle income countries in Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia with focus on Sub-Saharan Africa. As this is an evidence and gap map, we realized that there was large evidence with regards to impacts of infrastructure, from production infrastructure on nutritious diet. But there was a huge gap with regards to impacts of this infrastructure on women economic empowerment and even gender equality. Little evidence was found on farm level energy access and power access, and its impacts women economic empowerment in Africa. So yes, there's a need to synthesize where the evidence is dense. There's a need to synthesize so that we can come up with systematic reviews with where there are gaps. And you know, in Africa, most of our African leaders, they tend to take decisions or make decisions without the evidence. So our EGM or our evidence products would inform these African leaders to have an evidence product to make informed decision with regards to the investment, especially with regards to infrastructural investment towards women economic empowerment.
You mentioned the evidence gap map, that's the EGM. It's an emerging tool, we see, but it's to help the governments, the Global South, you mentioned, to design evidence-based policies to tackle development issues. How can this be achieved on the continent? And what are some of the challenges you think the African governments will be facing or could face in adopting this EGM?
Okay, thank you very much, Bill. So first of all, I'll just use one word, funding. If our evidence and gap, yes, then we can look at where there are evidences and gap with regards to any sector of the economy.
I think we lost Clarice there. Okay, Clarice, can you go on with what you're saying?
Yes, I was saying that I'm going to use just one word, funding. If our African leaders are able to get enough funding for research to be carried out in the evidence and gap map, we'll realize that we'll see where there are evidences and where there are gaps with regards to which sector of the economy they need to focus on, so they can in turn make evidence-informed decision-making.
So are there areas where you've seen this evidence, the EGM, come to play and the government apply it and actually have positive results? Are there examples you can give to us? Do we have Clarice? Clarice, are you still there? I think we've lost Clarice, and we'll move on to other stories now. We'll see South Africa, where we see other reports still coming in that shows that after months of underperformance, South Africa's local currency bonds are generating some of the highest returns among emerging market nations, and that's a relief rally that is set to continue to the year end. So yields on government securities reached a post-pandemic high in September, making them the worst performers in emerging markets at the time, after Turkey, amid a relentless sell-off fueled by concerns about a burgeoning budget deficit. Now, since then, they've earned 6.8% in dollar terms, more than 4 times the 1.6% average return of developing markets. Now we go over to where Egypt Air is set to receive 18 Boeing 737 MAX 8 aircraft, adding more narrow-body jets to the state-owned airline's fleet. The North African airline will take on the aircraft as part of a leasing agreement with Airlease Corps, as according to people familiar with the matter. Sources said the airline will take the Boeing aircraft between 2025 and 2026. And that's a wrap on Business Incorporated. Do join us tomorrow for another edition. I am Will Ibong, and thanks for watching.